Hi, welcome to APICS Inland Empire's Navigating Through Volatility webinar series. So we're excited to kick off our next webinar. We have such a great lineup of speakers. If you aren't able to join us live, we also are putting them in our archives. So stay tuned for that. It's being sponsored by LMA Consulting Group. And today's webinar is with David Porter. David has been a symposium speaker and panelist in our past. We appreciate that, David. Our symposiums are really popular and provide a lot of value, so we appreciate that. And now he's back to talk about freight flows and supply chain hiring activities. So Dave Porter is a partner with Orion Solutions Group, an executive recruiting, consulting, and project delivery firm in the areas of supply chain and finance and accounting. He has 25 years of leadership experience in logistics and supply chain industry. He served as the president of Hub Los Angeles and Hub Golden State. He's held numerous sales leadership roles, and he served as an EVP of Supply Chain Solutions, 3PL and trucking brokerage, among other roles for the Hub Group. And most recently, he was CEO of Rail Delivery Services, an award-winning tech-forward drayage, trucking, dedicated, and consolidation company in Los Angeles. And so Dave is definitely really well known in the freight field and transportation field, and is now becoming the guru when it comes to staffing and hiring. And by all means, with the coronavirus challenges, trucking, transportation, and hiring have been in a state of disruption, to say the least. So we're really looking forward to hearing what's happening in that world and what we can do about it. So with that said, I'll turn it over to David. So thank you, David.
Great. Well, thanks, Lisa. It's a pleasure and an honor to be asked to speak to you and APICS. What a great organization. LMA and APICS is. So I appreciate the invitation. So as Lisa said, we're going to talk about, COVID's impact on freight flows, the supply chain, transportation in particular, and the hiring picture, how it's affecting that. So here's some of the items that we're going to hit on, kind of the macro trends. And I got to tell you, preparing for this presentation, sometimes you can put together a presentation and use the same presentation time after time after time. The stats with this particular one are changing hour by hour. I can't tell you how many times I revised this, Lisa, because I wanted it to be current. And I didn't want someone to challenge me and just say, hey, that's not the statistic anymore. And I'm sure it's already dated, even though I updated it this morning. We'll talk about employment within supply chain, what we're seeing across different modes, whether it be trucking, intermodal, air, ocean, what we can expect to see post-virus. There's certain things we can do to prepare ourselves to be best positioned going forward, and those are going to be the main points. So, with a rapidly changing landscape, this quote rings particularly true, and I love it. It's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. So, we're going to do the best we can.
And by the way, I'm promoting David's partner, Mario, to be a panelist as well. So that's and so when you need to bring Mario into the mix, David, he's now promoted as well.
Fantastic. And Mario, go ahead and add any color commentary around the way, but I'm especially going to ask your expertise when it comes to the rail section that'll be coming up here a little bit. Mario's background, he spent 27 years with the CSX Railroad. He was a VP at Hub Group, past president, chairman of the board of the Los Angeles Traffic Club. He's still on the board, and he's with me at Orion Solutions Group here in Los Angeles. So, as we look at this, you can see what's happening with the unemployment situation. And I love this graph because it shows it in historical perception perspective. You go back to 1970, go through 2010 when we had the big recession. We thought that was a big spike, but look at what we're faced with right now. Just the last 3 weeks, the spike we've seen is unprecedented, and it makes the supposed spike that we saw in 2010 seem like nothing. This will put it in a little bit more perspective. take a look at this animation here. This takes us through from 1970, the 80s, we had a recession in 81. There's 2010 right there. We thought that was a spike, but look at what we're facing now compared to that. It makes it like a minor event. So that's where we're at right now. We've lost 17,000 jobs in the last 3 weeks. Fortunately for those of you in the supply chain has been impacted one of the least areas. And here's another look at it. This is unemployment claims. We had almost 10 years of consecutive growth in the employment sector, and we lost 701,000 jobs in the month of March. So 10 years, unabated growth, we lose 701,000. Of course, things didn't get really bad until the latter part of March, right? So you can see that and the latter part of the graph there.
Now, David, about that, I have a quick question. I understand from the Inland Empire Economic Partnership has been doing, has a group of economists that's been doing work in this area. Certainly it's bad at the moment because everybody's, the stay-at-home orders are in place. Although they're predicting, or they're hoping, well, depending upon how things go with the medicines, but at this point, it looks promising to have more of a V-shaped recovery. I don't know if you're going to go into that as well, but that's what I hear from them is that once we get folks out, it shouldn't last as long anyway, is the current thinking. So hopefully that turns true.
Yeah, the Inland Empire may fare a little bit better than other parts of the country or even Southern California.
That's true.
Distribution centers and warehouses there. Amazon has more DCs in the Inland Empire than anywhere in the United States. And as many of you have seen, Amazon's looking to hire 100,000 people right now. Walmart is hiring lots of people, and those people are going into these DCs and fulfillment centers. So yeah,
that's a good point. It depends on the industries that are prevalent, and this area has a lot more manufacturing and distribution, which are better off, if you will.
Yeah. So that's a great segue, Lisa, because let's take a look at this broken out by the different types of employment and what we've seen. Of course, retail's done bad, but hospitality, which is restaurants and hotels, has gone down the most. It has just absolutely gotten slaughtered. You can see retail is not doing very well. So different sectors are feeling different impacts. And out of this 701,000, you can see that overall transportation and warehousing, that category is only down 5,000. And actually warehousing is up 8,000. So to the point, we have some people are not increasing their warehousing staffing. Traditional retailers, think JCPenney's, think Sears, think Macy's, some of these companies are going to be in a little bit of trouble. TJ Maxx. So I'm also, in addition to Orion Solutions, I'm also partners still at Rail Delivery Services. And I can share that some of their traditional retailers are really down. They're just not shipping. They've cut off ordering right now. So traditional retailers, non-essential retail is getting hurt really bad. But within retail, even some of the off-price sectors are doing okay. If you're selling food, think Big Lots, think Family Dollar, Dollar General. Those retailers are doing pretty well, in some cases asking for extra capacity. And speaking of warehousing, I consulted with one of my local experts here in that area. And warehousing in Los Angeles in particular is really jam-packed right now. And, freight's starting to flow from China again. We'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting.
the DCs are jam-packed. So these warehouses here are bulging at the seams. It's very hard to get space in the big warehouses right now. There is space available in the small to mid-sized warehouses, but warehousing is doing really well. If you're a warehouse worker, you're probably not too worried right now. So as you can see again, warehousing increased last month. Amazon and Walmart, as we discussed, have been hiring a lot of people. Some trucking companies, one of the big port guys in Long Beach, they laid off 120 drivers. There is still a driver shortage. We'll talk about that. But in talking with trucking companies all over the country, some trucking companies and 3PLs and truck brokers are actually up. Just before this call, I was on the phone with a $1 billion one, a really good size carrier. And a week ago today, they had their all-time record day. That's in terms of volume. This was a 3PL, not in terms of margin, because they've had some pressure on the margin. But it's really, it depends on if you're a trucking company, what commodities are you focused on, and you know, reefers and people that are servicing grocery warehouses and that type of thing. Of course, they've been doing really well. But last week, as I'll show here, I'll get to it in a second, but the things really changed. Last week was an inflection point. People were stocking up. You couldn't get toilet paper. The shelves were bare at all the retailers, but that has changed now, and the market has really changed, and the dynamic has changed between carriers and shippers. I wanted to talk about truckers for a second. Truckers right now, of course, I'll flip ahead. They're our heroes, right? You'll see truckers driving with masks right now. You know, they're going into warehouses. They're continuing to work, and we're reliant on our truckers. And hopefully all of us can be, you know, real patient. That right now the roads aren't very busy, so the trucks don't annoy some of us like they have in the past. But you know, even in the future, I hope that we can all be good Samaritans with our truckers and let them pass if they need to pass, or get in front of us if they need to. They've got a tough job, and if it wasn't for the truckers right now, we wouldn't be getting anything to the stores, and they're doing just a tremendous job. What I wanted to talk about, though, is the overall trend with truckers and truck drivers. While some companies are laying some of the drivers off, if you go to Indeed or anywhere else, Craigslist, you'll see all kinds of ads continuing for truck drivers. We'll see a little bit of that subside right now, but it's going to swing right back up. And you can see right now, you know, what's projected to happen in terms of the shortage of truck drivers. There's going to be a lot of retirements, as you can see in the little script below there. Replacing retiring truck drivers is going to be a big issue. And as you know, trucking companies have incredible turnover, and any individual trucking company may have as much as 100% annual turnover. So they're having to replace their entire fleet every year. What is important to think about, one of the takeaways I wanted everybody to have from this particular situation is this is temporary. And the temptation for many is going to be to take advantage of what's going to become some depressed rates and maybe abandon some of the contracts that you've negotiated. That is a very short-term strategy that's going to save you some money in the short run. You don't want to do that long-term. And what I want to really emphasize here is if you look at this sign, imagine you're a hard-working driver. You're out there, you're facing coronavirus. People are asking you to work. You continue to work. You pull up to a dock window and you see a sign like this. If you're 1 minute late, you're going to be fined $100. And in many cases, they won't let you use the restroom.
Wow. Is that pretty common now? Like things like this?
You know, this is a pretty extreme example right here.
Yep.
But, you know, some of us maybe on the line have actually driven with a driver before. I've done that. It was a wake-up call for me. I'm a fairly patient person. You've got to have the patience of a saint between how you're treated in traffic, how you're treated at the security gate when you pull into a facility. I was with a driver. We pulled up to the office to just get assigned a door. The guy had his brakes start 30 seconds before, and he refused to talk to us for 15 minutes, even though he could have just said, "Hey, door 145." And you know, I've made this point in the past. There really is not a driver shortage. There is a shortage for a respect for the driver's time. And I'm going to go into this a little bit, but the shippers that don't treat the drivers correctly, they're already paying a price. They're paying higher rates. And I've been in the situation that whether it was at any of a number of different companies and positions I've had, bad companies get bad rates or they just don't get capacity. So you're paying the price now, but when the time comes when capacity is really tight and this pendulum will swing the other way, you're just not going to get the help that you want. And those that treat the drivers well, even if they don't have the most desirable freight, they're going to get their support long term and they're going to have stability of rates. So suggestions are, you know, the golden rule: treat your drivers the way you want to be treated, just common sense. But some people kind of treat them like third-rate citizens, and it's just not right. And it doesn't take a big budget to do this. It just takes a little bit of organization in your yard and just treating the drivers with respect. When you look at driver surveys, a lot of what they talk about in terms of dissatisfaction, oftentimes it's not rates that are the biggest issue that they have. It's a lack of respect that they get from shippers and also their own dispatch at times. So treat your drivers well. Become a shipper of choice. This is a term that's bandied about quite a bit in the press and at different conferences that you go to. Detention, holding up your drivers. You know, sometimes the drivers that you'll see them, they'll be lined outside some of these big facilities and the line can be a half a mile long. Meanwhile, these drivers aren't productive and you're just eating up their time. Some of these drivers get paid to wait in those lines, other ones don't. So it's a huge challenge and drivers will refuse. Those that are independent contractors, they'll just refuse to service certain facilities. To the extent you can be flexible and open up windows for deliveries to your facility or pickups from your facility, that is huge. That'll be reflected in the rates that you're charged. For example, you saw that sign earlier, if you're 1 minute late, you get fined $100. In some cases, they'll just refuse you outright. If you can open up windows and give like a 4-hour or 2-hour delivery window in Los Angeles, Atlanta, Chicago, Seattle, New York, these big cities, you can imagine the traffic and how hard it is to show up. By the way, in many cases, you can't show up early to these places either. You can imagine what they're dealing with. The more driver friendly you can make your facility, the better rates you're going to have and the better coverage that you're going to have because more people are going to want to deal with you. It's just helping yourself by being a good citizen.
Hey, Dave, if I can bring something up real quick.
Yeah.
After a year of shippers doing a much better job because they're understanding that, in the first quarter of this year through March, driver delays are up 24%. And that's because capacity is loosened. And unfortunately, they're going into some of their bad habits. Also, the food industry has been so good. You know about delivering to these grocery warehouses. They're a pain.
Right.
So that's some of the delays. But even with all this time, they've gained, by not having no traffic on the freeways, a 24% jump in the first quarter. So unfortunately, we are starting to see some of these bad habits come back as capacity loosens after going a whole year of just some great improvement. So it's something we really got to watch out for. But unfortunately, in the first quarter, it went backwards.
Thanks, Mario, for that. And that's true. And this is short-term thinking versus long-term thinking, relationship building, and being strategic with your supply chain. I can share, you know, dealing with customers in the past as a carrier that had contractual rates. They ceased participating in their contractual agreement that they made. There's often not big penalties for doing that. And they say, you know what, I'm going to do better just going to the spot market. And then the market flips and they're left out in the cold. Because if you do that to a carrier right now, when there's plenty of capacity, come September, October, when you really need them, they're not going to remember you. You're only going to get the support that you deserve. And it's fair. So this is a graph that shows, you know, the different areas, the level of impact. As you can see, this goes from 315 to 43, so into last week. And you can see all areas are declining, but the areas that are declining least involve grocery warehouses, food, and the ones that are declining the most are retail, traditional, non-essential retail.
Well, and David, I think you may have this later in the presentation, but a question came up here, so I'll defer to you when you want to answer it. But there's asking, what should we be doing now to prepare for back to business? Do you anticipate driver shortages as manufacturing non-essential that is currently shut down starts up again? Or, you know, so I don't know if you're gonna. I don't want to deter you, but I wanted you to be aware of the question.
Yeah, we'll just jump to that right now. There is a potential issue down in the port because there have been some people laid off, you know, down in the port once things really fire up down there again. And then overall, there have been, boy, Mario, you post a trucking company going bankrupt almost every week.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I think one of the big things you got to watch out for. I mean, I think it's going to take us a little while to get back. You talk about a V shape. I look more at a W. But I'll tell you, last year, 800 carriers, and last year was a good year, 800 carriers went out of business. That's the second most in 10 years. There
Really?
are a lot of zombie carriers out there right now, and they may be propped up with this new stimulus, but they're not going to make it. I think the loss of carriers is going to be significant. So I think sometime in the fourth quarter, and I think we'll have a decent fourth quarter. I'm not going to go all crazy 4 or 5% GDP, but I think we'll make a nice comeback. We can clearly see some shortages in drivers, mainly because capacity and companies have just fallen out, and that's going to be a problem. You know,
So,
and you are going to see some layoffs. To a point where some of these people are just not going to come back. There's not going to be a job there waiting for them. So I would be concerned about the fourth quarter. The other thing you're going to have is, as Dave brought up, you're seeing China ramp back up, and I think Dave is going to talk to that. But while they're ramping back up, our demand is going to be completely slowing down.
yeah.
There is going to be, if anybody out there remembers the days of the longshoremen strike, they're going to have a congestion problem that will beat both of those longshoremen strikes we had in the back. And you're going to have to be ready for that. There's nowhere to put these containers. There's nowhere, as Dave said, the warehouses are full. You're actually going to see some cancellation of freight, because a lot of that is bought while it's in the water. It's going to get down here. There's no buyers for it. There's nowhere for this freight to go.
Yeah.
Mario, you raise a really good point. So I was speaking to a gentleman yesterday that's involved with warehousing of a lot of retailers. So imagine this. You cannot ship this stuff to the stores yet. You've got, you know, Hawaii printed shirts and this kind of stuff, seasonal type of fashion items. And, you know, they're only good for so long. They have a hot season. So, you know, this is going to cause some problems. Another issue that's going to cause capacity issues is the orders for Class 8 trucks has gone to a low that we haven't seen in years. People are not ordering new containers and trailers right now either. Between that and the bankruptcies and some of the layoffs with drivers, this pendulum goes back and forth, back and forth. And unfortunately, what we see cycle after cycle is when freight dries up like it is right now, people don't invest in the infrastructure like they could or like they could afford to. And then when it comes back, the capacity's not there and rates shoot up through the roof. Now, some of this shortage is manufactured shortage. Containers are being stacked right now in Southern California more than ever for this time of the year. The vessels, the ocean liners, they are actually cooperating. Oftentimes it's hard to get them to cooperate. One guy they'll continue, just like OPEC, they'll continue to float that capacity out there. They're being pretty disciplined this time. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And it's actually reduced capacity pretty significantly on the Trans-Pacific and transatlantic trade.
Interesting.
We have more ships. We actually have more ships idle right now than we had in 2008, 2009. That's quite incredible.
Wow. Okay. That's now you said there was 800 carriers that went out of business in 2019. It sounds like you're thinking that 2020 will be significant in terms of those numbers as well. Are some consolidating as well as going out of business, or are they pretty much just going out of business?
We're seeing mergers. We're seeing mergers and outright BKs.
Okay.
Yeah, but I got to tell you, you'd see it a lot sooner. But again, this new stimulus package is going to prop up a few of them, but they can't survive this. That's why we call them zombie carriers. They're not going to survive this, and they may survive the next 3 or 4 months because they're going to be propped up by this money, but they're not going to make it because it's just not that. It was happening. Insurance costs, operating costs, driver costs. They were ready to go down anyway. We would have had this happen if coronavirus didn't happen. These carriers were going down anyway.
Because basically they don't have the right fundamentals or financial fundamentals. It sounds like. Is that right?
Right.
Is that what you mean? Okay.
And I don't want to pick on any companies in particular, but I'll mention a couple that everybody's talking about. Roadrunner. They just keep selling off pieces, selling off pieces, selling off pieces. There's not going to be much left at the end there. It's kind of like what you saw on the retail side with Sears Kmart. And then YRC, I know people have been predicting their demise for the last 10 years, but at some point there's nothing left. And it's going to be very difficult those are two major carriers that
those would be major losses.
Yeah. So here's some predictions, some expectations, and some experience that various companies are having. This is from different fleets, and you can see up at the top is how has things affected freight levels. And it's interesting. It seems that the smaller fleets have been impacted more. If you look at that decreased section there, in terms of decrease of volumes, decreased 30%, 33%. Bigger carriers over 100 power units, they're saying 21%. So that's significantly less. And actually, in some cases, their businesses increased 25%, which is more than what you see with the smaller carriers. In terms of expectations, what these companies are expecting, and this is pretty current data. Again, we're expecting bigger decreases with the small to mid-sized fleets than we are with the larger fleets. Some of this may have to do with contractual freight that the larger companies tend to have, and just the types of freight profiles that they have.
Yeah, I guess that's similar to the bigger companies are weathering the storm a little bit better at the moment because they have reserves than bigger.
Yep. So here's some of the measures that are being taken by some of the fleets. Look at the canceled truck orders, kind of what we're talking about. This is going to reduce capacity. 14% of them have canceled truck orders or just not made them. And these are the types of measures that people are taking as a result of the coronavirus. People working from home, they're obviously trying to keep their terminals cleaner. Not an environment that's typically known for their cleanliness, so that's probably in order, and I hope that they'll continue that. Canceled trailer orders, another reduction in capacity for when this does bounce back. This is really telling. So again, last week, everyone I talked to, the market really started to shift, and it really shifted again this week. And so if you look at the market demand for dry vans, just our typical trailers that you see out on the road, and then refrigerated equipment, look at this peak that we had here. This is, of course, responsive to the run on all the grocery stores. These guys were extremely high up here. It dropped down, and look where we were. This was last week. It's the freshest data that we have through week 13.
Right.
We had a drop also in dry van, but it just wasn't from the peak on the reefer side. The commentary here for the sectors that were not already suffering, that day came sometime in week 13 as we saw a broad collapse in freight volumes. That's what we're seeing right now.
Wow, that is significant.
It's very significant, very significant. And some of the rates that Mario and I heard that these reefer carriers were able to get, like over $3 a mile out of California.
Absolutely.
Crazy money. You know, this is spot, but it was really an incredible market being driven by demand, and that's going the other way now. So here's another instance of us showing you the inflection point that we're in right now. This is kind of a little meter that shows to the left, that's shipper power. This is negotiating power that a shipper would have. And as you go to the right to 100, that is negotiating power that a carrier has. And the week before last, we were at 60, which meant that the carriers had the power, okay? There was, especially on the refrigerated side. In 1 week, that shifted back 15 points. And I think the next time that this is published, this just came out yesterday, but the next, we're going to see that needle move further to the left.
And I think the scary part about this is they put right there on the title, there's no floor in sight. Usually we see this shift, but we know where it's going to end up. We know by the time of year, we have no idea where this is going to drop this time. We're in uncharted territory right now.
That's right. So all companies are under a lot of pressure to reduce costs right now. And transportation is a cost center. You know, people, it's logical that they should want to reduce their transportation costs. But again, you got to take the long-term view. Don't, you know, really take too much advantage of this dynamic of shipper power, because it's not going to last long-term. And when the pendulum swings the other way, and who knows when it will, it could be a V, right? This is unprecedented economic stimulus that the Fed and others are orchestrating. They want to V, that's their goal. Mario's probably right with a W or a U or something like that, but it will come back. And when it comes back, you want to be well positioned with your partners.
Absolutely. I have a feeling that that's, if you take nothing else away from this webinar, I've seen many clients that didn't, people remember, relationships move faster during times of crisis than at any other time, and people remember, and they will stick with you if you treat them well, and they will not stick with you otherwise. So I have to say, I think that it's very important.
Mario and I have both been in meetings on the carrier side, and we have these equipment allocation decisions we have to make when the season hits. And the guys that weren't loyal, everybody says, pardon my, this isn't too bad, screw those guys. They're trying to get help. So this is interesting. A commonly cited ratio is the number of loads to the number of trucks that are available to haul these loads, right? And going into March, in March, it was a 3-to-1 ratio, which for those of you that aren't really used to this statistic, that sounds really bad. You know, wow, there's 3 loads for every truck. That really isn't bad. Just to give you some context, during a peak season, that number's in the teens or 12 or 15, you know, up in double digits anyways. So 3-to-1, keep in mind, this is the slowest time in the year for shipping in almost all areas of the country right now. So we were 3-to-1 in March. So look what happened. This is the similar type of statistics here. We were at 3-to-1. And then as we got into the month, it went up, but then look what happened. It went up to 3.5 for a high and we've dropped down last week 1.5 trucks per load. And so that is negotiating power for the shipper. It absolutely is. That is a very, very loose market. With the map on the left, you can see the areas, certain areas of the country obviously are impacted more. The next chart shows it even a little bit better. So you can see 0 to 1 truck per load, all the way to 15. Well, there are no dark purplish or dark reds anywhere on the map. I don't take Canada into consideration. I think that might just be like their, I don't know. But if you look at the US here, it's almost white until you hit the very far part of the West Coast. But some of the major markets, look at, our other office for Orion is in the Detroit area. The autos have just collapsed, absolutely collapsed, right? So the demand there is very, very light. Look at Seattle, major port of Tacoma, very little demand up there. And these light pinkish colors just indicate not a lot of demand. This is right off of DAT as of today. This is the current.
Wow. Thank you for giving us this up-to-date information. So we have a question about this. Mike is asking, is the load to truck ratio driven primarily by supply or demand, or does it vary by industry, or?
It's usually a function of demand. It's gonna vary by industry, and as the map indicates, it varies by the amount of the part of the country that you're in. When this really goes to the 15 to 1s and that type of thing, that's in your peak shipping season. There's actually a little bit more capacity available then. It's really a demand-driven type of equation.
And it sounds like in the non-peak season, the 3 to 1 that we were seeing before in March was not abnormal. It was pretty reasonable.
That's healthy. That's what you expect. Yeah, that's what you expect. That 3 to 1 is a pretty loose market. So this is on the rail side, and if you look at that green bar, so green was last week. Okay, this is the latest information from the AAR, American Association of Railroads. And our office in Detroit is just wincing because they know this is what's happening right now. Auto parts down 69.5% on the railroad.
Wow.
Which is a major driver for railroad volume and profitability. And as you look at this graph, the only thing that's up is food related, which isn't a big surprise, right? We still have to eat. And you've got people, if they had a toilet paper row, that would probably be doing pretty well.
Now, is this because in the auto industry, they're repurposing plants and they're certainly not producing cars?
Yeah, they've just shut down. They are making ventilators in some cases, I think, to help out and also to keep busy. But Mario, maybe you can give a little historical perspective on, what this means for the railroads, the health of the railroads, and have you ever seen numbers like 69% down?
No, well, we saw it one time, but actually they're talking that this one is going to be worse because there was a chance for it to come back last time. We actually peaked in cars, autos. I believe we did close to 18,000 vehicles or 18 million cars. I get my numbers wrong, but autos peaked in 2017. So it was already slowing down. One thing I want to do bring up about freight when Dave and I talk about truck and rail, we're always ahead of the curve. And when I said ahead, we feel the slowing down before it actually happened. So while there was a good year, there was a freight recession and it started in late 2018. Just like we're going to see the recovery first, it's very important we bring that up. We've been deep into a freight recession, and it's been going on for a solid 18 months. So a lot of these numbers, the coronavirus is obviously making them even worse. But this was starting, this intermodal of which I was in at CSX. There was times last year they were falling to 2016 levels. I mean, while the trucking industry was doing well, the railroads were having a lot of problems. Now, some of it was because you had the tariffs. The tariffs hit the railroads first. international being down, international intermodal is big, and they're really big around the ports. So, the tariffs had already hit them. This coronavirus is going to take them to a new level. We're going to go way past the 2008, 2009. Last week alone, they were down 16%. They're down 12% for the whole first quarter, and that's before we're going to have this terrible second quarter. Now, the rail's a lot different than the trucks. They're very solid when it comes to financial, and that's been part of the problems. They cut a lot of their lanes that were not profitable, or what they felt weren't profitable. When I said profitable, I mean CSX runs at an operating ratio of 56, 57. They're making 43 cents on the dollar. It's incredible, the operating ratios that they work under. But but even if something operates at a 20, 25, they'll do away with it because there's just more profitable freight. And it was called precision railroading that was brought in by Hunter Harrison at CSX, and now it's spread out to all the railroads. Also, last week, their employment, they have cut 12% of their workforce just in 1 year. So they're already at their lowest since 2015. And I believe that the layoffs and the furloughs that they're going to do in the next quarter will take them back to the 2010, 2009. Now, the railroads are doing 3 times the revenue and margins that they were doing back in 2008, 2009. And their workforce is going to be the same size. So that's going to tell you the cuts that they're going to do. It's going to take them a lot longer than the truckers to get back. They're truly looking at 2021 before you see them be able to come back. And I mean, as you know, their fuel is down. In fact, I put their worst products. Autos are way down. Steel, crushed stone, and petroleum products.
Yeah.
They don't see that until 2021, where the trucking, you could see a solid fourth quarter. The railroads are looking into 2021. So the losses you'll see there are going to be a lot bigger, but they are so financially equipped. Remember, 2 major railroads in the East Coast, 2 major railroads in the West Coast. Very little competition for them. They know how to work through this.
Yeah, those are great points, Mario. And I'm glad you highlighted the fact that we were our carriers, last year before coronavirus, we lost 800 carriers, right?
Yeah.
And we're in the hiring business. A number of them had instituted hiring freezes already. Now coronavirus. And just in the last 2 weeks, we've seen some major 3PLs announce significant layoffs in the hundreds. And it's really, it's really something else, because a lot of these 3PLs and truck brokers have had unprecedented growth in the last 10 years, and they just took the sickle to it, and they have laid off a lot of people.
So I have a question, Mario, on the rail. So it sounds like they're better equipped to deal with this and they know how. So does that mean that most likely they'll just make the adjustments they need to make, and they'll probably keep the rates, it sounds like they're good at maneuvering through this. So they're going to make the adjustments, but
they're going to make the adjustments. You will see little move on the rates. They basically are going to hunker down, and they're going to go into, they already understand this is a 2021 play. They will make their furloughs. They'll do their layoffs. They're going to park all these engines. They're going to park all the equipment. They're very smart on how to do this. They know how to ramp it back up, and they certainly know how to ramp it down. So you're not going to see a big play on the rails. They'll play a little bit on the intermodal side, but they're going to do very well, and they're going to come out of this quite strong, actually.
Right.
Well, my aunt has always worked for CSX for, forever. She retired from there, and she is very high on them. She wasn't, she was not a somebody, if you will. But anyway, that'll give her, she'll be smiling, I know.
Yeah, no, they know how to do it. But again, I don't call them a monopoly. When I was there, that was a bad word.
Right.
Let's be honest. They don't have the competition that the truckers have.
Absolutely. And so, not to give out investment advice, because that's not the purpose of this webinar, but if you see a big dip in the railroads, buy them because there's no competition to speak of.
Yep. Well, which would be my aunt's advice too.
Okay, good. Good. So let's talk about the ocean for a second. We've touched on a lot of this, but some of you have seen in the press these blanked sailings, right? They're just taking the vessels out of service. Mario, I think you said there's more parked now than there are on the water.
There's more parked in the water now than there was in 2008, 2009. And remember how just we felt during that time. We have more ocean liners now that have been parked than at that period. And we're not even through the worst quarter is coming up.
So you can see, this was making news before, and we had 45 service cancellations within 1 week. It went from 45 to 212. So that gives you a sense of the magnitude of all this. China is pushing out freight. You're seeing these statistics that the factories are running it. It depends on where and so forth, but different statistics, maybe 70 and 80%. But if you don't have a customer, in the United States is the biggest customer, that's going to cause some issues. And I have heard reports about people having to warehouse their goods in China because the demand's not here and there's not very much warehousing space available anyway. So we're starting to see this domino effect and backlog. So what you can read is that they're expecting the overall year-over-year impact to be a 10%, which I was surprised it was that low, of a reduction in ocean freight, which is similar to what we had in 2008, 2009. But the thing that's different this year, 2008, 2009, they didn't have the discipline. The lines didn't work together to dump this capacity, right? Because when you do that, when you sideline these vessels and you restrict the capacity, you can keep your rates up a little bit better. So the rates just went in the toilet, 2008, 2009. They're down now, but it's not a bloodbath like it was then. And it seems like from that perspective, for their perspective, they're managing it a little bit better. So, let me, I had a question from a longtime person I've done a lot of work with over the years. They were worried that with this reduction of capacity, what about when I do need to ship out of China? Am I going to be able to get the capacity that I need, right? And so I didn't know the answer to that, but I did contact a very good sized national freight forwarder that is one of Mario's clients that he and I both work with. And their recommendation was, we're probably okay right now, but by the time you hit June, make sure that your orders are in plenty in advance to make sure that you get that capacity and that you don't get things held up if it's going to be time-sensitive freight. So check with your forwarder, your NVO, your steamship line partner, whoever you have your contracts with, but you should be anticipating some problems. Potentially, and just make sure that with your partners, you've got a good plan so you'll be protected later in the year.
I had a client ask me that question too, so thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. Don't expect it to be a normal type of situation this year. Plan in advance and get your orders in earlier. So anyway, as we saw with our statistics, just a quick summary. Supply chain overall, despite the fact we're talking about 800 carriers going under and all the things that's happening, this is a relatively good industry compared to traditional retail, oil and gas. There's a lot of them, automotive, that have been hit extremely hard. We've been hit hard, but they've been slaughtered, okay? It is very specific depending on the area of the country and the types of commodities that you're dealing with. I can share that my former company is going gangbusters with Campbell's soup. Makes sense, right? That's kind of bomb shelter food and something that, people are stocking up on right now. Kimberly-Clark, Amazon and Walmart obviously are doing quite well. Amazon had to cancel Prime Day just because they're so busy just with their regular orders right now. Non-essential retail has been hit hard. Orders have been postponed to some undetermined time in the future. Again, last week, this week, inflection points for this part of whatever pattern we're going to have, a W or a Ziegler line or a steep cliff. People are calling it a cliff. Things are moving the other way starting right now. Carriers are idling capacity. We talked about vessels being parked, containers being stacked for intermodal capacity, people postponing or canceling asset purchases, whether they be trucks, trailers, containers, or what have you, in order they can't afford to make these investments right now, and they're trying to preserve their rates and be mindful of that supply and demand situation. So what can we do now?
David, I don't know if you're going to talk about this still, but on the 3PL side, you said
Yes.
that they were starting to experience layoffs, but what do you think is going to happen there? I mean, it seems like it depends on who they serve, of course, but like you said, the warehouses are stuffed. I mean, I don't know. What do you think about this, the 3PL?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It does depend. There's a couple things, right? So for shippers and 3PLs, there really is an opportunity now. And right now I'm using 3PL in terms of somebody that would help you to optimize your supply chain, right? Minimize your inventory, optimize across modes or carriers, this type of thing. And when times are tight and people are being pushed to reduce their costs, having a strong 3PL partner is extremely important. So whether you have the wherewithal to bring in a TMS technology on your own, some type of Mercury Gate or Oracle transportation management system, or there's a lot of them out there, obviously. Now is the opportunity for you to take a look at your supply chain with the excess people you may have and try to find a way to lean it out a bit. So
I look at some of the technologies as well.
Yeah, so with the technology, I was just speaking earlier today with a major 3PL, and my experience as a major 3PL in the past is times like these can be very good for business for them to go in, and you're really a consultant for them. And in some cases, a 3PL can go into a shipper at no incremental cost to them, offer them a proposal, and take costs out of their supply chain through a consolidation program, carrier optimization, modal optimization. And so that can be very good for 3PLs. Traditional truck brokers and that part of the 3PL world, volumes are really falling off right now. And that's why they're laying off. TQL laid off 700 people, Echo laid off 200 people, Arrive laid off over 100 people, and it goes on and on and on. So they're going to be hurting. Of course, these companies have been hiring tons of people over the past. So it's going to be a mixed bag depending on what way you're approaching 3PL as more of a consultant or maybe just a capacity play. If you're pure capacity, I think you're going to be hurt a little bit. If you have some value to bring and can give them some optimization opportunities, I think you've got some opportunity to actually maybe grow your business right now.
Well, and I mean, speaking of which, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that APICS Inland Empire is gained approval to go online for some of our education, and that's like you said, it's an opportune time to think about how to improve your business. So we're going to be and we're doing these webinars for that reason as well. So we'll be proceeding, and then my company LMA Consulting, it's the same opportunity to help clients with this sort of manage through this sort of situation. So to your point, by no means do we want to be in this situation, but we're glad to be able to help.
That's excellent. And as a former provider of this type of service, I can share with you that if you really find somebody that you're comfortable with partnering with, such as LMA, if they take a look at what you're doing, there's a very high probability that they're going to be able to offer you some ideas to reduce your costs and improve visibility and overall performance of your supply chain. So it's really something you should be looking at right now. So I really encourage people to build flexibility into their transportation program. You know, as Mario said, there's only 2 railroads, for example. If I had a big intermodal program in particular with lots of volume off the West Coast, I would have it set up so that I had access to both of those railroads. Because even if there's not a coronavirus or a shortage of capacity, sometimes one of them gets their tracks washed out and the other one's the only one that's running or whatever. So if you
backup, right? I mean, it's really critical.
Yeah. So I think that you need to have a multiple carrier strategy. I think that you need to take a look at, again, being a best of class preferred shipper, someone that carriers want to serve. Mario had mentioned that these grocery warehouses, they're legendary for being a nightmare. They hold the drivers up for hours and hours. They're just famous for that. But, you know, to the extent you can minimize that, open up the delivery and pickup windows and that type of thing, you're going to find more people that are able to service you. If you only ship truck, take a look at intermodal. It's a great option. It's a great way to get freight off your dock, and there's ways to engineer intermodal programs. So once your pipeline's full, there'll be really no impact whatsoever, and you can save money in many cases. So you want to have multiple carriers and modes and routing per lane. Don't take advantage of the spot market. My recommendation, if I'm running a transportation program, I'm going to have core carriers, contractual carriers, multiple carriers, and I'm also going to have some brokers and use some people for spot market to handle my surge freight and that type of thing. Don't make massive deviations from that program and just go pure to spot, because you're going to get hurt when this thing swings back again. And don't think you can predict when it's going to turn around again.
Very true.
Understand the financial condition of your carrier base. A lot of people have been caught surprised. Mario and I have talked to people.
Very important.
I can't believe that so-and-so went bankrupt with no notice. Or good carriers, Schneider eliminated their final mile delivery program with no notice, giving people no options. When was that, Mario? It was last fall, I think it was, right?
Yeah, it was during the fall.
Yeah. So, and it was just because they weren't making enough money. They had to make a business decision. But you've got to understand the financial condition of your carriers. And again, have multiple options. Protect yourself. Some of these guys that are wounded animals or zombie carriers, as Mario said, they've got cheap rates. And sometimes you get what you pay for, and there's a risk premium baked into that. So be very, very careful. And the other thing that I can share with you, there is talent coming available right now that is very worthwhile for you to invest in. Whether you need data analytics people, you need to run your business with data and have real-time visibility to everything that's going on in your companies, or whether it be accounting or finance or within your supply chain, talent is becoming available, good talent. We had a 2% unemployment rate prior to this. And for college educated, solid people, it was much, much lower than that. You really couldn't find people that were available. Now that talent is becoming available, might be a little more affordable than before. So it's an opportunity to invest in your business with some world-class people that can really help you make a change in your business. So you really want to take a look at that right now.
It's very true. I had a client that acquired a key resource during the recession. And even though he didn't have anything for that person to do, but that engineer helped him, design a new product line and brought him to a significantly higher level of success later. So you're absolutely right.
Fantastic. And since Lisa was remiss not to plug her company, I would be remiss not to plug my company at this point. And hopefully she doesn't cut this out in the editing later.
No, it's good.
But Orion Solutions specializes in supply chain transportation talent, as well as our Detroit office, very strong in automotive, finance, and accounting. We have multiple CPAs. Our differentiation in the marketplace, as you can tell, Mario and I know a little bit about transportation. We're not just sales guys or recruiters out of college. We can really help to consult with you. On the same side, on our accounting and finance practice, data, we have people that actually did that work in the business. They are CPAs, they are former programmers, they're graduates from the best supply chain schools. So we would love to help you or just talk to you. We love to talk shop. So if we can help you, my number's on the bottom of this presentation. Contact us anytime.
Absolutely, and you've been a great partner to APICS, so it's
Thank you.
really the right time. And now I understand folks are concerned, and hopefully those that are in a decent cash position or can invest for the future. It's been proven, whether it's in people or assets or technology. It's been proven in the Great Depression, as well as the significant, I don't know, I think they call it the Great Recession as well.
Right.
But people who invested during those times, which very few did, but they ended up far significantly better off than everyone else. So it's tough, but it can be worth it if you do the right, if you're clear about what you're investing in, and that's what I understand anyway.
Absolutely. That's 100% right. That's all I have. That's my
All right. Well, I'm getting comments that folks liked it. I know that we're going to have a lot of folks listening to this afterwards as well. I think your action items pretty much sum it up. And thank you for taking us through. It seems like it's very different between trucking, rail, and ocean.
Yeah, the ocean.
Ocean,
And in the 3PLs, but they're all down, but there's varying levels of what will happen. But it's interesting, though, that the ocean carriers have gotten themselves a little bit more together so that they can hopefully weather this storm a bit more.
Hopefully, they need
So
to.
we'll see. I mean, things will be things could be very different coming out of this than consumer patterns might change and whatnot else. I don't know if you have any thoughts about how this might affect the transportation industry going forward, because things are likely to evolve as people get used to doing things differently.
You would have to wonder about somebody like a US Foods or a Cisco and these types of restaurant supply type of companies. I think it's going to be a while, even when things open up, before people are comfortable sitting in a booth right next to somebody else. It's going to take us a little while probably to ease back into a pattern similar to what we were in before.
Right. Right. Yeah, very good. Well, I want to thank you very much for being on our webinar series. We will post this on our Navigating Through Volatility webinar series. And with that said, I want to bring up the next few webinars. Well, actually, next up is me. So on April 13th, I'm going to be talking about why is there no toilet paper, which everyone wants to talk about these days, and how to manage the bullwhip effect, which is really quite the challenge currently. At least best as possible. Then we have, after that, we have Eileen Angelo, and she's going to talk about navigating coronavirus impact with our employees. She's an HR expert, and what we need to be doing now. Then we have, and thank you, David, by the way, for trying to get us in touch with the ports. We were able to get Marcella, I think it's Carabo. I'm not sure how to say the last name, but anyway, she's going to talk about what's happening at the ports, and she's with the Port of Los Angeles. So that'll be great to understand what's happening there. And then we also have Veronica Contreras is going to talk about moving manufacturing to Mexico and what would it take, because there's certainly a lot of people are seeing the effects of having the full supply chain in Asia. So perhaps I think Mexico and the US will surge a bit following this. So she's going to talk about that. And then we also have Robbie Kelman-Baxter, who's an expert at membership economy and subscriptions, and she's going to talk about navigating through volatility with a forever transaction, which basically means how do you keep long-term relationships with your customers so your customers keep coming back to you, which is certainly a critical component in these environments. So we have some really good speakers coming up. Hopefully you'll join us, and our webinars will be archived also on our website. So thank you again to David and to Mario as well. It was great to talk with you, and I took a lot of notes myself. So
Awesome.
Thank you, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a nice Easter.
Thank you, you too.